It wasn't the dusty pickup or the gray clouds rolling low over the hills that unsettled me. It was the silence. In Harlow Ridge, spring fog clings to the ground like regret, curling around porch swings and fence posts like old memories that never really left. That morning, it pressed in on our little house like a secret waiting to be told. I zipped up my worn canvas backpack, the one I'd carried since junior year, and paused to look out the window. My garden was waking up early this year. The daffodils were standing straight, bright little soldiers, as if they knew I needed one last moment to remember where I came from. My chest ached in a way I couldn't name. "Delilah, your breakfast's getting cold," Mama called from the kitchen. Her voice sounded normal, strong, steady, but I caught the slight tremble hiding under the words. Martha Bellamy was a woman built from early mornings and late shifts, her hands cracked from scrubbing floors and her back bent from carrying me through life alone. She never let the world see her tired, but I knew. I always knew. When I stepped into the kitchen, she was flipping pancakes with military precision. Her apron, faded from too many washes, was dusted with flour, and her eyes stayed on the window even as she said, "You need to eat, honey. Columbia's a long way from Harlow." "I'm not really hungry," I murmured, easing into the wooden chair with my stomach tied in knots. She didn't push, just slid the plate toward me and said, "Then pretend." So I did. I forced down syrup and butter and guilt, every bite heavier than the last. The kitchen clock ticked louder than it should have, each second pushing us closer to goodbye. I looked up at her. "You still think I shouldn't go?" She set the spatula down and wiped her hands slowly. "No, I think you're right. The city won't be kind, but knowledge is something no one can steal." She smiled, soft and wobbly. "But it doesn't make this easier. You'll be out there alone, Delilah." I reached across the table and took her hand. "So were you, Mama, and you raised me just fine." She held on for a second longer, then let go. 2 hours later, I stood at the bus depot, a chipped brick building that smelled like motor oil and old goodbyes. The bus to Columbia wheezed into place, its windows smeared with yesterday's rain. Mama repeated her checklist, voice firmer now. "Money in your boot, don't talk to strangers, text me when you get there." I nodded, pretending like I hadn't memorized those exact words every time she left for work on night shifts. We hugged, longer this time, tighter. "Everything will be fine," I whispered. I don't know if it was for her or for me. The ride to Columbia stretched out like a ribbon of uncertainty. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the fields blur into buildings, dirt roads into pavement. The colors changed, but the ache inside didn't. For 4 years, I'd worked any job I could find, folding clothes at the thrift store, weeding gardens, baking pies to sell at the farmer's market. Anything to save up for culinary school. I didn't want to just cook. I wanted to make people feel at home. Mama even sold our last goat to help cover tuition. That kind of love, it doesn't come with ribbons, but it stays with you. Heavy, steady, sacred. When I stepped into my dorm room, the bleach smell hit me first. It was tiny. 2 beds, a metal desk, 1 shared bathroom, and 3 strangers I didn't know yet. But it was mine. It was a start. I emailed Mama that night, told her the city was bright, the school was exciting, and the girls seemed nice. I left out the homesickness, the way my throat clenched when I unpacked her hand-stitched pillowcase. Her reply came fast. "Proud of you, my girl. Make 'em taste your heart in every dish." I reread it 3 times before turning off the light. That was the first night I didn't cry. The second week in Columbia didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like a test. My dorm was small, a box stacked with other boxes, and I shared it with 2 girls I barely knew. Sky, from Charlotte, had a glitter-covered laptop and a calendar full of social mixers. Ava, the quieter one, was from Greenville. She kept her side of the room neat and wore headphones that never left her ears. We got along by mostly staying out of each other's way. Culinary school was everything I'd hoped. Intense, chaotic, thrilling, but also harder than I imagined. Chef Delgado didn't believe in hand-holding. He barked critiques like they were gospel, and praise was as rare as truffle oil. Still, I loved every second. I wanted to learn, to earn my place. Evenings were quiet. I cooked noodles with whatever I had, emailed Mama before bed, and reread her replies like they were warm blankets. I never said how lonely I felt, or how loud the city could be when you felt invisible in it. Then came the Friday that cracked everything. I had just finished an early morning lab, perfecting omelets of all things, and came back to the room needing a nap. The door creaked open, and something felt off. The air was wrong, still. Then I saw it. The bottom drawer of my dresser was open. My stomach dropped. I lunged forward and yanked it out the rest of the way. Nothing looked touched, but I wasn't taking chances. I threw my backpack on the bed and reached under my mattress, heart pounding. The envelope was gone. My emergency stash, the savings Mama had helped me build, tuition money, rent cushion, every hard-earned dollar I had left for the semester, gone. Panic bloomed behind my eyes. I tore through my bags, my closet, even flipped my pillowcase. Empty. I staggered out into the hall, breath short and sharp. I went straight to the RA's desk. Mrs. Coleman barely looked up from her clipboard. "We haven't had any reported thefts," she said, lips pursed like a lemon. "You probably misplaced it." "I didn't," I whispered. "It was taped under my bed." She blinked, unimpressed. "Well, unless you have proof." I turned and walked away before she finished. My vision blurred. Proof. What proof did I have other than a gut full of fear? In the stairwell, I almost ran into a guy coming down. Sketchpad in one hand, flower on his jeans. He stepped aside and looked at me. Really looked. "You okay?" I shook my head, lips trembling. He tilted his head. "Someone took something from you?" "How do you know that?" He hesitated, then said, "Saw one of your roommates digging under your mattress yesterday. The one with the gray hoodie. Ava." I blinked, stunned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it happened to me once," he said simply. "Nobody told me." I stared at him. He was a little older, maybe 22, with kind eyes and a voice that didn't try too hard. "What do you want in return?" He smiled slightly. "Cook me dinner sometime, that's all." "Deal," I whispered. He extended his hand. "Mason, third floor." I took it, warm, steady, the first bit of solid ground I'd felt in days. That night, Mason and I waited near the dorm entrance. Ava came in late, makeup smudged, keys jangling. When she saw us, her face drained of color. Mason stepped forward. "We know." She didn't argue, didn't scream, just reached into her tote bag and pulled out the envelope, handed it to me like it burned her fingers. Then she walked away. By morning, she was gone. I opened the envelope in my room, counting every dollar. It was all there. Later that night, I knocked on Mason's door, holding a basket of groceries. "You hungry?" He grinned, starving. I smiled back. For the first time since arriving in Columbia, I didn't feel so alone. It started with a photo album. A quiet Sunday afternoon, 2 bowls of leftover lentil soup on the table, and Mason flipping through a package his mom had mailed from Savannah. The album was thick, the leather cover cracked and sun-worn, smelling faintly of cedar. "This is her," he said, pointing to a photo of a woman in a navy blue blazer and pearls, standing in front of a school. "Vivian Monroe," he said, "principal at Roosevelt High for 15 years. Tougher than nails, but always wore pink lipstick." He smiled, a little lopsided, then flipped the page. "And this is Charles Monroe, my dad." The photo was older, faded. A man in uniform stood between 2 women, one of them Mason's mom. His face was sharp, unreadable. His eyes, something about them pulled at me. "I don't remember much about him," Mason continued. "He left when I was 5. Mom said he was a soldier, but also a ghost." I felt something strange flutter in my chest, the name. "Charles?" Mason nodded. "Yeah. My mom, she said my dad's name was Charles too, Charles Bellamy. She said he was in the army, stationed somewhere near Harlow Ridge before I was born, but I never met him." Mason chuckled. "Well, I guess Charles was a popular name back then." I laughed too, but it didn't reach my stomach. The coincidence lodged itself in the back of my mind, like a thorn under skin. We didn't talk about it again that night. Instead, we curled up on the couch and watched a black and white movie about a bakery in Paris. Halfway through, Mason reached for my hand. I let him. It wasn't the first time, but it felt different. We had been spending almost every evening together, cooking, studying, teasing each other about who could chop an onion faster. Our routines had softened into something familiar, safe. But after that night, after that name, I started noticing little things. The way he crinkled his brow when he was thinking, the slope of his nose, the shape of his mouth when he laughed. I caught myself one night staring too long at his profile and wondering, was it possible? No, that would be ridiculous, absurd, the kind of melodramatic twist only bad TV writers would dare try. But still, the idea had been planted, and it grew. One evening I called Mama. We hadn't spoken in a few days. I asked about my dad again, careful, casual. "You said his name was Charles, right?" "That's right," she said, "Charles Bellamy." "Did you ever meet his family?" A long pause. "No, honey, it was complicated. We didn't keep in touch. Why do you ask?" "No reason," I lied. Later that night, I dreamt of 2 photos side by side, one of Mason, one of me. They blurred and melted together. In the dream, someone whispered, "Look closer." I woke up sweating. Mason and I didn't talk about family again for a while. We focused on finals, our apartment hunt, and whether goat cheese really belonged in a dessert. He said no, I insisted yes. But the undercurrent remained. A name, a photograph, a silence that was starting to speak. We were building something fragile and bright. but suddenly I was afraid it might be built on quicksand. And in the quiet moments when our laughter faded and the room stilled, I could feel the question rising. Who are we really? And what if we weren't supposed to be this close? What if fate had made a mistake? Or worse, what if we had? It was supposed to be a simple weekend, a visit home, a chance for Mason to meet Mama, finally sit at her kitchen table, taste her cornbread, and maybe, just maybe, have her see the man I had been falling in love with. We packed early Saturday morning, Mason overprepared as usual. He brought snacks, 3 types of chargers, a blanket for emergencies, and even a toolkit in case something went wrong with the car. I laughed. It's just a 2-hour drive. Small towns get cold at night, he said with a wink. The ride to Harlow Ridge was filled with old stories about how I fell into the creek behind the church during VBS, or the time I tried to make biscuits using salt instead of sugar. Mason held my hand the whole way, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of mine. But as we turned onto the dirt road toward my house, something shifted. There was a truck parked in the driveway. Mason's face stiffened. That's my mom's truck. Vivian's? I asked. He nodded slowly. Same dent above the rear bumper, same faded school magnet. Before I could respond, the front door creaked open. Mama stepped out onto the porch, her apron still on, her eyes tired in a way I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. Behind her, another woman emerged, tall, composed, hair pinned up tight. Vivian. Mason and I walked up the steps, slow. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Mama didn't say hello. She just looked at me and whispered, "We need to talk. Inside." The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and something heavier, like nerves and memory. Vivian sat at the table, hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Mama leaned against the counter, gripping it like it held her upright. "I'm going to start," Mama said, "and I need you both to listen." I nodded, even though my legs felt unsteady. "Delilah, you've asked about your father for years. I always said he was a soldier who left before you were born. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either." I felt Mason tense beside me. "His name was Charles," Mama continued. "Charles Monroe. He was stationed near Harlow Ridge in the early 90s. We met at a fundraiser. It wasn't meant to be anything serious. I didn't know he was married, not until it was too late." Vivian's face was pale. She didn't interrupt. "When I found out I was pregnant," Mama said, voice cracking, "I made a decision. I didn't tell him. I didn't want to blow up a family. I raised you by myself. I don't regret that, but I should have told you more." I sat frozen. The name, the photo, the features I'd started to notice. "Charles Monroe was my father," I whispered. Mason turned to Vivian. "You said he was mine too." She looked at him, eyes glassy. "I thought he was. He and we were trying to fix a broken marriage. I told him I was pregnant, hoping it would change things. But he left anyway, and I raised you believing you were his because it was easier than the truth." He stood so suddenly his chair screeched across the tile. "Are you saying we might be siblings?" "I don't know," Vivian said. "But when I saw you two together, something inside me panicked." I stood, legs trembling. "This is a mistake. It has to be." No one spoke. The silence swelled until Mama whispered, "We'll get a test." Mason looked at me, not as the boy who brought me star anise and sweet potatoes, but as someone suddenly lost in a question too big to hold. "I need air," he muttered, walking out. I followed. We stood under the porch light, the sky heavy with stars, cold air biting at our skin. "What do we do?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "We wait and hope." I wanted to say something, anything, but there was nothing left except the question, and the silence that came with it. The envelope came in a manila folder, sealed tight like it held a grenade instead of a truth. Vivian delivered it herself, showing up outside my dorm like a shadow with something to confess. She didn't ask to come in, just stood in the hallway, her coat buttoned high and her eyes rimmed red. "I owe you the truth, Delilah," she said softly, "all of it." I folded my arms. "We already know enough." She shook her head. "You know the fear, you deserve the facts." I let her in. She didn't sit, just placed the envelope on my desk and backed away like it might explode. "I had the test done. I couldn't carry the lie any longer, not after seeing you two like that." My heart raced as I pulled the paper free. Medical jargon, percentages, official seals, then one line that made my knees buckle. "Probability of biological relationship, 0%. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. "Mason isn't Charles Monroe's son. He never was." I blinked. "But you said—" "I lied," she admitted. "I told Charles I was pregnant, hoping it would save our marriage. I didn't know who the father really was, and after he left, I let Mason believe a story that made sense, easier than rewriting his life." My hands trembled, the paper fluttering like wings. "He doesn't know?" "I tried," she said. "He won't answer, but maybe he'll listen to you." I nodded, numb. That night, I knocked on our old apartment door. Mason opened it after a long pause. His face was tired, unshaven, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I held out the test. I brought the truth. He took it, scanned it, sat down like all the air had left the room. "So I've lived 21 years believing a lie," he said. "I thought I had his eyes, his temper." "You believed the version you were given," I said gently, sitting beside him. "That's not your fault." He looked at me. "What does this mean for us?" "It means we're not related, and I never stopped caring about you." He reached for my hand. This time there was no shake in his fingers, just warmth. "I want to believe this," he said. "I'm just still scared." "Me too." We sat in silence, rain tapping gently against the window like it had something to say. Over the next few days, we texted, not poetry, not declarations, just check-ins. "Cupcakes came out okay, missing your frosting." "First time I've smiled all week." A week later, I came back to the apartment. He opened the door without a word. "I made pasta," he said. "It's probably terrible." "It's probably home," I replied. We didn't talk about the test or the fear, not yet. Just shared a meal and leaned into the quiet that felt more like comfort than avoidance. Later that week, Vivian invited Mama over for dinner. She brought deviled eggs. Mama brought peach cobbler. They sat at our mismatched table like wary diplomats. "I don't expect forgiveness," Vivian said, "but I'd like to build something honest from here." Mama nodded slowly. "We all made choices, some out of fear, some out of love, maybe both." I looked at Mason. "Maybe it's time we stop surviving and start living." He reached for my hand again. This time I didn't let go. We cooked dinner together that night, not just because it filled the room with warmth, but because we could, because it was ours again. Not a beginning, but something just as rare. A second chance. Spring came early that year. In Harlow Ridge, the dogwood trees bloomed like soft-spoken promises, white petals fluttering down country roads as if nature itself was whispering, "It's okay to begin again." The cold that once clung to everything, to our words, to our hearts, started to lift. Not suddenly, but gently, like morning light sliding through blinds. Mason and I didn't need big declarations. Every breakfast shared over jam and toast, every small gesture like brushing flour off each other's cheeks, became part of something new, something tender, something real. One Sunday afternoon, we returned to the lake just outside town, the one I told him about during our very first long drive. The water was still, the sky wide and open. He brought a blanket. I brought sandwiches. We didn't say much, but as I looked out across that quiet stretch of blue, I realized I wasn't bracing for storms anymore. I was here, and so was he. 2 weeks later, Mason woke me just before dawn. "Put on your boots," he whispered. "We're going on a walk." I groaned but followed. He led me to the park where we used to sit before class, where I once taught him how to knead biscuit dough with his elbows because he was scared to overmix it. The grass was wet with dew, birds were just beginning to stir, and there, under a tree just beginning to bloom, he knelt. No speech, no audience, just us. "Delilah Bellamy," he said, voice steady but soft. "I've loved you as a stranger, as a maybe, as a miracle. And for a while I thought I had to let you go. But now I want to love you as my wife. No more confusion, no more silence, just us, just truth." He held out a ring, simple, gold, with a pale green stone that looked like sage. "You make everything grow," he whispered. I didn't cry right away. I just nodded, laughing through the yes, and pulled him up into a hug that felt like coming home. We planned the wedding for late fall. Nothing big, just family, close friends, a backyard, and a long table beneath strings of lights. I baked the cake myself, a 3-tier lemon lavender. Mason built the arch from old wood he salvaged behind the architecture studio. Our mothers walked us down the aisle. Vivian wore silver, Mama wore blue. They didn't cling to each other, but they didn't flinch either. When I looked into Mason's eyes as we said our vows, I didn't see doubt. I saw roots. Dr. Whitman was there. He stood in the back, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. When I introduced him as my father, he simply nodded. The words still felt new, but not unfamiliar. And yes, Dr. Langston came too. Mason had written to him, slowly rebuilding a bridge between what was and what could be. The night ended with pie, dancing, and laughter beneath the stars. We didn't care who watched. Later, wrapped in a quilt Mama made when I was 16, Mason whispered, "We should have broken." I leaned my head against his shoulder, but we didn't. We cracked, we bent, but we didn't break. Above us, the stars blinked like small promises. Around us were the people we loved, imperfect, forgiven, and here. And inside me at last was peace. Looking back, I've learned this. Family isn't always blood. Love isn't always easy. And healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it's chosen. And the kind of love that grows roots after the storm? That's the kind that lasts. Some stories don't end with heartbreak. Some begin right after the truth shatters everything. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't about getting even, but about healing, growing, and choosing love again. Delilah and Mason could have broken, but they didn't. They cracked, they bent, and then they grew roots. If their journey moved you, if you've ever carried silence, survived betrayal, or dared to rebuild from ruins, know this: real love is never loud, but it stays, and it transforms. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you believe in second chances, in quiet courage, and in stories that rise from the ashes, subscribe to Sweet Revenge Happy Ending. We share true stories of strength, scars, and the kind of endings that leave hope behind. And if you have your own story, we'd love to hear it.